Evidence video. I'm going to be showing you the details that need to be included as you consider embedding the evidence you've pulled from the kite runner into each of your body paragraphs. So this particular slideshow is on Schoology, just like all the other ones, and it'll walk you through some of those details themselves. I guess first I do want to show you this. So Monday when you come to class, we're going to be working on this particular handout to kind of get your head wrapped around how to set up those paragraphs. So this allows you to kind of break down the elements that need to be included structurally in a paragraph so that you can start crafting your ideas. You can then transition everything from your thinking with this into the rest of your 6 body paragraphs. So I call this the claim support explanation handout, which basically is the same idea as PI that you looked at in the other video, the point information explanation acronym metaphor. So claim would be for the point, support is for the information, and explanations for explanation. But this particular handout, I'll show you in class as well. You're going to write your thesis statement at the very top. I have some details for you to remember when you're thinking about your evidence. So once you have your thesis up top, we have that there so that you can reference key terminology into your claim for your first main idea. So in the claim section, you're going to type in this open spot what your claim is or what your first topic sentence will be. So your claim is a statement that refers to your thesis statement. You're going to use keywords from the thesis to help cement your coherence, and this will be the topic sentence for that paragraph. Once you've done that, then you want to start considering how you're going to set up your first example. So you want to set the scene. In other words, write 1 or 2 sentences that give background information or context for the excerpt or quotation. You're not summarizing the story. You're just providing enough information to get your reader into the mindset of what's going on in the story where that quotation is found. So it only needs to be 1 or 2 sentences. The next section is where you're going to embed your quotation or lay out your quotation. So have that written out. And in this box that says signal phrase, this is what I'm going to go into in the slideshow. But we want to consider how you'll transition into that quotation so we're not just quote dropping and plopping things in without any kind of connectedness. Remember, coherence is really important. Everything needs to build upon the previous sentence and move things forward. So you're looking at the signal phrase as a transitional phrase. This is not going to be a full-on sentence, although it could be. But it's there to kind of indicate or set up that quotation, and you're going to have a comma after it. So it's more like a phrase, and it ends with a comma after a verb. So for example, I've written here, Amir reveals his remorse when he asserts. Okay, so I've done a couple setup sentences that set up the scene, and then I have this signal phrase here that identifies maybe who the speaker is, where it's coming in, the speaker is and how they might be saying something. So notice I use the verb asserts. There are a variety of verbs you can use versus just says or quips, but come up with something a little more important than that. And then insert the quotation right after it. After the quotation, then you want to make sure you have your MLA citation indicated. So in parentheses behind the quotation, you're going to put the author's last name and page number and then a period after the quotation or after the parentheses. So that goes outside the quotation marks in the parentheses, outside the parentheses. Then you've got the explanation section. So you're analyzing and explaining. I want you to give 2 reasons that defends your claim, how this quotation helps support your claim. And then you'll have a concluding sentence that basically restates the topic sentence. So once you've done each of those pieces, then down in this open spot, you're actually going to put them all together into a paragraph. You'll then submit this to me. I'm going to check it off to see that your structure's there, that you're doing it effectively, and give you some feedback on that before you move forward into the rest of your essay. So that's what we'll be looking at on Monday. So just very quickly, I suggest you reference this slideshow as you set up your signal phrases. Again, this gives you some nice ideas as to how you can do those things. But when we use evidence from an outside source in our work, we need to follow the process of, setting up that context, having a signal phrase that directly introduces a quotation, have the MLA citation, and then have your connection or your explanation behind it. So the signal phrase is there to signal where source material came from. You name the author, and you can name the author and the occasion and the credentials in it. And then it includes or describes what the author is doing. So if you're not naming the author and occasion, you might be naming the character in a story as you set that up. Here's the list of verbs that hopefully will broaden your vocabulary with how you introduce a quotation. Again, don't just say the character says or the character responds, but there are a variety of ways that you could imply that action. So reference this list if you'd like. So your source material is the second step in the incorporating evidence. So you're putting your material quoted verbatim directly from the source with quotation marks around it. Make sure that your punctuation is correct. So if you have anything other than a period as a part of that direct quotation, that always goes inside the quotation marks. If there is no other punctuation, then the period is going to go on the outside of the MLA citation at the end. Paraphrase material, which we're not really worrying about with this essay, does not need to include quotation marks. Quotation marks are only for directly referenced from the text, verbatim statements coming directly from the text. So here's some examples of how you can punctuate your quotes. So if you describe the quotation in your own words in a complete sentence, which could be a signal phrase as well, you're going to use a colon afterwards to indicate the beginning of a quotation. So if you've got that signal phrase or statement with a quotation, you want to use a colon and then the quotation so it's connected. You don't want to separate, otherwise you're going to need another signal phrase before the quotation. So that quotation should always be connected to that signal statement or phrase right ahead of it with punctuation. So for example, Sir Winston Churchill made a witty remark on the attitude of a pessimist. That's a complete sentence. So if this is a signal phrase leading into the direct quotation, I put a colon there so that I know that quotation is connected to that signal idea. If we don't have a full sentence there, but just a phrase, which is kind of what I'm encouraging you guys to do, then you're going to put a comma after that verb before you include the quotation. So in Shakespeare's play, As You Like It, Touchstone says to Audrey in the Forest of Arden, comma, the fool doth think he is wise. So there's your traditional signal phrase as a phrase where you have a comma after it, introducing the quotation. The first one is if you have a full-on independent sentence that introduces your quotation. You can try either way in this, but the paper I gave you is kind of encouraging the phrase. So once you've got your signal phrase with that verb and punctuated correctly, and you've got your quotation included with quotation marks, then you're going to put the citation. So the citation is following the Modern Language Association setup, the MLA setup, where you have in parentheses the author's last name and a page number. You don't have to put the letter P in front of the page number. You don't put PG in front of the page number. You just put the number. So that always goes in parentheses behind the quotation at the end of the sentence, and then the period goes after the quotation. So make sure you're following that style. I also have a document on Schoology called MLA documentation. You guys can reference that to understand how to prepare and set up those citations as well. So here are a couple more examples. Formatting your citation. This one talks about where you can put an author's name. So if you are going to reference Khalid Hosseini's name within the text itself, which I don't think many of you are because you're really focusing so much on the story, but if you introduce Khalid Hosseini in the setup or in the signal phrase, you actually don't put his name in parentheses here. But if he is not involved in the signal phrase, then you will put his last name in parentheses in the in-text citation. So as it says, the author's name may appear either in the sentence itself or in parentheses following the quotation or paraphrase, but the page number should always appear in the parentheses, not in the text of the sentence. So don't, in your signal phrase, put the page number there. It's only in the parentheses after. And then the period always, always, always comes after the parentheses. So that's basically it. And then once you've got that signal phrase quotation punctuated correctly, then you can get into your explanation and your analysis. Don't let that quote stand alone. Make sure it's always connected to the main idea in some way and explain how it does that. So just quickly, let me show you a sample paragraph here. Let me find it again. I know I'm taking a while on these, but I have, this is from a previous essay, so we can see how everything kind of flows together. So here's the thesis at the top. Though both novels illustrate a contrast between accepting and deserving responsibility, The Kite Runner and Lord of the Flies diverge in their explanations of how the distribution of blame should occur, how it does, and the role guilt plays. So here's our first paragraph, our topic sentence or a claim point. Both Asef and Jack use fear as a tool to stay in power, but they approach the situation in different ways. So connecting back to the thesis. They don't really have that connecting word, that keyword, which I want you guys to consider, but it still works as a topic sentence. So here's our background. Seth goes his whole life mostly unchallenged. So when he realizes that Hassan has to bravely stand up to him, he decides to make sure that never happens again. Emir watches his best friend get raped, but because of Asef's manipulation of his emotions, he feels powerless to step in. So there's that setup of the situation. Signal phrase. Struggling with his decision, Emir explains, and then our quote, I was afraid of Asef and what he would do to me. I was afraid of getting hurt. And then we have in parentheses, Hosseini and the page number with the parentheses and the period behind it. And then here is our explanation. While Asef acts out of selfishness and a desire to stay in control, Emir adds to the power imbalance by doing nothing. So then we move into our next one. A part of him knows that he should intervene, but that is not the part that falters, as he recalls. In the end, I ran. This pattern of blame where the antagonist does the wrongdoing and the protagonist does not or cannot stop it also appears in Lord of the Flies. So the second half of this particular paragraph isn't as strong. So kind of disregard this, but look at this first half. So we have a solid topic sentence. We've got the setup of background information, and then we've got the signal phrase with the quotation and the in-text citation. And we've got a little bit of an explanation. This one could have been explained a little bit more thoroughly. They kind of rushed into their next point. But I will try to be making some suggestions on that as you guys move forward. So that's incorporating quotations. I'm talked long enough. Hopefully you guys stayed with me through this whole video. So we've looked at essay structure, and you've looked at incorporating quotations, documents to access for your help, both this PowerPoint and then I have an MLA documentation PDF as well in the Schoology folders. So good luck. I will be around to help you guys on Monday as we start typing.